I'm Chris Fulton, and I work for ElectricCloud, but I just kind of wanted to let you know a little background about myself. Before I was with ElectricCloud, I used to be a build and release engineer, working a lot with ITIL and stuff like that as well for quite some time. And also, when I've been at ElectricCloud, I've been at several of our financial services customers who are very heavily regulated. They have lots of processes they have to do. And so this is kind of going to be kind of my experience that I've had with some of these customers, as well as some kind of takeaways that I would like you guys to kind of have for how you can improve the process of ITIL and DevOps. And I also want to show you a practical example kind of how you can do this within our product ElectricFlow and kind of automating the process from flow to whatever ServiceNow or anything. I may be saying ServiceNow quite a bit. That's because my background with financial services, that's what I typically see. But that's not to say you can't use whatever other process you use for your change management. So everyone kind of knows ITIL for quite some time. It's been around for quite a while. Everyone's heard of it. Everyone's, you have to have your changes. You have to do everything for your changes. It's been, a very regulated sort of a thing. And at times, people kind of debate whether ITIL and DevOps can work together, and I'd kind of like to argue, that ITIL and DevOps can certainly work together. They can, fit together very well. And one of the things I'm kind of doing, with ServiceNow, you can through ElectricFlow put stuff back and forth with ServiceNow and make this process a lot more automated. So that's what I'm going to be focusing primarily on. So one of the things, first of all, how does it fit into DevOps? Some things that I kind of joke about, you see the traffic jam here that a lot of times people feel, and I've heard this from a lot of our customers, that I'm stuck in change management. I don't know what I'm doing because I've put something in a change request in and it takes 5 days or it takes, however amount of time to get that approved. How can I get out of this? How can I stop when, somebody asks me, is this ready? And you say, oh, it's just waiting for approvals. And I've heard this time and time again. And so one of the things I want to kind of challenge you with is, should you automate some of these approvals? And I'll explain a little bit what I mean. I know people sometimes are scared, hey, I'm regulated. I can't really automate an approval. Why should I be doing this? So I want to kind of tell you, what can you do? So one of the other things that I want to, one way you can do this is I challenge you to categorize your changes. So different changes, I know if most of you guys have probably read the Phoenix Project, read several other books out there, categorize these things. Figure out what's a high change, what's a medium change for you, and what's a low change for you. And more importantly is get humans out of the business of creating change tickets. What do I mean by this? I mean that we can certainly create change requests by me typing on my computer, here's my change request, here's what I'm supposed to do. But most of that information you should be able to gather from your systems. You should be able to get all of the information that you would normally get in a change request from your systems. By that I mean you should be able to get, what changes is a part of this. Your systems should let you know. You should be able to get, what dependencies do I have? Your systems should be able to tell you this. There's absolutely no reason why you should be sitting at a keyboard typing in one. I'd also challenge you, and I'll go through this a little bit more in depth in my future slides, but perhaps there could be an auto approval method for low risk changes. If there's no dependencies, perhaps you shouldn't necessarily be sitting there, oh, approved, approved, and have a person's job basically being reading change requests and clicking approve. What do I mean by high risk changes, first of all? These are ones, maybe they contain lots of dependencies, they can bring down many applications. These can also be, those changes that you don't necessarily normally, you would want to make sure that if I change this code, that's the, if somebody touches this piece of code, if somebody touches this, we really need to look at it carefully. Those are things that perhaps a traditional change process really is what you should be doing. You probably, for these changes, should not be automating them because they are things that you definitely want to make sure that you've had somebody really take a close look at it. For medium or low risk changes, for these things, I would challenge you, find ways you could perhaps auto-approve these sorts of changes. Things you want to make sure you have, though. You should have verifiable test coverage. You should make sure that this is automated testing, that you've done as much as you can to automate it. You should have verifiable pipeline that you've demonstrated that it's worked in lower environments. You should make sure that you're doing change requests or doing some sort of change management at each of the environments. But this can be in an automated method. It doesn't have to be a person's clicking a change, clicking approve in each and every environment. And it should be repeatable stuff. Maybe if it's something that you do every single day, that's the same thing every single day, and you've proved that this change is not high risk, those could be items that also may be candidates for just auto-approving them. some people may say, why do I have a change then if I do that? Why would I want to have a change if I'm just auto-approving it? And that's because as I've worked with many financial services, they want to have a log that, hey, we've documented this data. We have this data. So you still have the log of your change. When an auditor comes to you, you can still show them what you've done, but you can also show them, hey, I have verifiable test coverage. Hey, I've verified this in all of my environments. Hey, I've repeated this time and time again. So they're more comfortable with doing this change, perhaps. And I would say, document every step for sure. So, like I said, perhaps think of some sort of continuous integration for processes. Instead of just, we've talked about continuous integration, continuous deployment quite a bit for things that are not necessarily processes, but for, this is my continuous deployment for, my application, my whatever. Think about this on the process side as well. So don't only think of continuous integration as something that you can do for your applications. Think about it for processes. And make sure you keep logs of things you've done. And I want to kind of point out, within ElectricFlow, you have this already built in from the get-go. So now I want to just go through a little bit of a practical example for you, to demonstrate how this might work. For this, I'm going to be showing you a practical example of ElectricFlow and ServiceNow. Like I said before, these actual systems don't necessarily matter. It's the idea that matters. So perhaps first you do a build and test. Maybe you do it in ElectricFlow, maybe you do it in some other system. I don't necessarily care. As a part of this build and test, I'm assuming that you're doing some sort of unit testing and all of those things. I'm assuming that you're doing a lot of those things and documenting the logs of them. And then perhaps at the end of your build, the cool thing is auto-creating a change record. So by this I mean take the stuff from your build and test and automatically put that in your change record. No longer be in the case where, hey, I'm doing this change request and I'm not going to automatically create it, so I'm going to finish my build and then I'm going to send an email to some other guy and tell him, hey, this is done, and then I'm going to sit down at my keyboard and create a change request and say, these are my dependencies. Don't do that. Do it from the system itself. Go through your change request process. Like I said before, think about ways you can automate the change request process. If it's a low-risk change, maybe you do just auto-approve it. If it's going to a lower environment, maybe you auto-approve it. Once it's been approved, you should be automatically starting whatever I'm calling a pipeline feature. So by this I mean there's no necessary reason that you need to sit there after it's approved and send an email to somebody, send something else, or have somebody look, checking records and saying, oh, this one's approved, now I can kick off my build. It should just happen automatically. So after you're done doing that, you've automatically gone through one area. Maybe you want to go to your pre-prod environment now. So auto-create the change request for that too. There's no reason, once again, that you can't do that. Some people may have their workflow within ServiceNow set up to, you use the same change request. Some people may use different change requests. That's completely up to your company and how you decide to do things. But I would say automatically do this at the end of your pipeline. And then once again, go through your pre-prod change process. Once that one's been approved, auto-starting it. One thing I want to kind of say on here is, another thing I've seen a lot of times, especially with financial services and other sorts of things, is while they want to do continuous delivery, they're still bound by stuff like markets and stuff. So they don't necessarily want to deploy something during market hours. They don't necessarily want to deploy something during the day because if you crash a trading website during the day, you're probably going to lose a lot of money, and you definitely don't want to take that risk. So after you're done doing that, maybe you want to go ahead and auto-create the change record again. You'll notice the theme through this is doing stuff automatically. So no longer spend a lot of time manually creating things. And this is truly how you can start getting value from still having this, you still have the record and everything like that, but you're having as much of it as possible automatically created. So you're no longer spending the time having a human do what a machine can do better. And then once you've gone through that and you've approved it, maybe you auto-start your production after, I'm saying after 7 p.m. within here. So once again, the market data can matter, and you want to make sure that you respect that. We'd like to say at some point maybe you could continuously deploy stuff during the market hours and not have a risk and say that there's no problem. Reality, what I've seen is it scares a lot of people very much because they don't want to bring down their websites. They don't want to do that. So I want to show you kind of more of a practical environment that I've set up within ElectricFlow. I don't know if you guys have been by our booth or not and seen kind of the demos and stuff. If you haven't, I'd encourage you to talk to us and try to see some of this stuff. But basically within here, I want to show you we have 3 environments within them. You can create stuff within these environments that's information that you need about the environment, everything that you might want to have. And then I also have my pipeline. For this example, I just have a very simplistic pipeline. It's just 3 stages. Within these stages, though, I'm saying, hey, I want to do the same repeatable task within each stage. What I want to encourage you, though, is how can you make this pipeline also talk to something like ServiceNow? And that's what I want to kind of show you, is how can I take this and retrofit it to work with ServiceNow automatically back and forth. So here's where I kind of want to explain it. Sorry if there's a lot of arrows. This is the best way I could figure out how to try to explain this to everyone. And it may be a little bit hard to read. But basically, you end up having your pipeline. And the first thing you're going to do, so right now you'll notice that I've taken out of here the building portion of it. I'm assuming, because that's the thing I get a lot of contention with a lot of times, is I have my build system, I love my build system. So take out the build portion of this. I'm assuming you're starting with your deploy portion. You'll notice that this is automatically kicked off. So with a product like ElectricFlow, we have a REST API. So what I would assume is that you're using ServiceNow's plugin, which will call our REST API, or using, if you have your own homegrown system, you use that to call our REST API, and you start the pipeline. As this pipeline starts, you'll notice I have what I call a gate at the very end of it. This gate at the end of it is saying, stop here. So this is where I'm saying that I want to automatically create the change record. So why do I have a gate? The gate could be an automatic sort of a thing that's happening for you as a part of the end of your process. You don't necessarily have to have this gate if you don't need it, but it may be in there. After you're done with that, you'll notice I have the entry gate into the pre-prod. So what this entry gate is saying is, I've created my ServiceNow ticket now. I've got the ticket in ServiceNow, the ticket's in ServiceNow. Maybe this is a high-risk change within ServiceNow, and I want to make sure that this change is really going to work. So I'm going to wait until this high-risk change is approved. But the thing is, I'm going to, from ServiceNow, call us automatically at the end of approval stage and change this gate. And so I'm going to automatically approve this gate once ServiceNow has said this is approved. So once this has happened, I'll run my build within pre-production. So I'll run or deploy, not build, within pre-production. This deploy within pre-production will go and do everything to my pre-prod using the same thing that I used in my dev environment. Assuming I've created a snapshot, I'm using the same one in my pre-prod, but then I'm having the gate at the end of this here. This is me sending it back to ServiceNow. So you'll notice I'm kind of doing the gates to send stuff back and forth between Flow and ServiceNow. So I'm saying there's some portions that I want Flow to take care of. There's some portions that I want ServiceNow to take care of. And I'm going back and forth between these 2 portions. And then you'll notice once it's approved, it's the same thing as before. I'm going to automatically do the gate from there, automatically approve that change request. And then I've gone through production. So this is kind of just, I wanted to go through a little bit of a practical example. Obviously, your actual workflow will probably be a lot more complex than this, and you'll actually have a lot more stuff within it. But just to give you an idea of a way that you can call stuff back and forth between the 2 systems. So now I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about our ElectricFlow ServiceNow plugin. So this is something that is actually, we've had a plugin around for quite some time, but just recently we've revamped this plugin so that if we're not right now, we will be very shortly in the ServiceNow plugins catalog. So it's within, you can get this plugin for you within ElectricFlow and ServiceNow, and it connects Flow to ServiceNow, and it's a bidirectional connection. So it's how I can do all of these things because I now have the plugin that I can go back and forth fairly easily. So instead of me having to know the REST API, know all of the REST calls, know all of that stuff, I can use the plugin to do it for me. So I've got a few kind of final thoughts. There's quite a few of them that I haven't, or not too many, but a few of them that I have within here. So one thing I really, really want you guys to consider is when you're automating processes, truly think about what a machine can do. I've seen time and time again where we start having people do stuff that machines do better. Machines can create change records. Machines can gather evidence from a build. Machines can decide, what's wrong, what's good. A machine can check your test coverage. There's a lot of things that we can use a machine to do that we've been doing by hand for far too long, especially when it comes to processes I've seen. Far too long we say, I have to have a human sit there and approve this. But think about what do you look at when you approve it? can you get that stuff that you look at when you approve it from the actual system itself, or is that something you truly have to have a machine to do? Also, having easily obtainable logs. So think about when you're doing stuff, a lot of people do the ITIL and everything and do all that. You want to improve your process. We also do a lot of those things because I want to have something if an auditor comes to me, especially financial services, those sorts of industries, I want to have something that I can give them if they come to me. If I don't have obtainable logs, what am I going to give them? If I've removed, especially like, we're talking about containers and stuff like that, if I don't have that information, what am I going to give? What am I going to get from that? And one other thing, I know in my process I had several different gates within there, but truly when you're creating a process, start to think about what gates you should and should not have. There's often times where I've seen where change request processes are way, way, way more complex and confusing than I think they really should be, because think about what's the purpose of having this change request. The purpose is to know, how risky is this change, to document that you've made this change. It's a lot of that stuff. It's not necessarily just, hey, I want to give some unnecessary process to somebody, because people hate clicking buttons and doing change requests from what I've seen. And then I know I've got quite a bit of time left, but kind of one of the final thoughts that I have for you guys is I want to make sure that you think about how can DevOps and processes, they should work together. I know that I've had several people that I've talked to, and even like when I had my interview for the DevOps.com, I believe it is, gave me the interview. The guy almost laughed at me when I said I was giving a talk on ITIL and DevOps, because for the longest time, they haven't been considered something that could work together very well. And that's something that I challenge you guys to look at and think, how can you make them work better together? Because they can and should work better together. And to do this, I think you have to think about automation at the process level, not just automation at the I'm delivering an application level. So that's all of the slides that I have, but I wanted to open it up if anybody has any questions for me. Yeah.
One of the common problems I face when talking to ITSM and ITIL folks is a lot of unplanned work and a lot of nights and weekends.
Yeah.
And so do you have experience in visualizing that, something
Yeah.
like that?
Okay, so the question was that a lot of people, you've seen where a lot of people hate the nights and weekends sort of work, and how can you reduce that? And I actually, one of the customers I work with that I've primarily worked with recently, that was one of the biggest value things that they told me is they got their nights and weekends back. And it was, it's not necessarily a dollar amount that you can put on that, but it's more of a satisfaction of life. And the way that I've seen that it works really well, like I was saying, automating stuff that you don't have to have a person there for. So for example, I want to auto deploy this at 7 p.m. You should not have to have a person stay there till 7 p.m. Maybe, yes, you should have them on call if something critical goes wrong, but a person shouldn't have to be there till 7 p.m. waiting to click a deploy. You should also have tested stuff in earlier environments. So you can say, I've gone through this layer of different testing. So by the time I'm actually going to what really, really matters, I'm fairly confident this is going to actually work. Because if you're not fairly confident it's going to work, there's absolutely no reason you should even try. So, is there a question?
The question is, the reverse, like if you open some incident or ticket in ServiceNow, does it also drive the workflow into your ElectricFlow?
Yes. So you can drive the workflow either way. So you can go bi-directional within the product. So within here, the plugin is actually bi-directional. So it'll go either way. So one of the things that I've seen that it's really great is from Flow, writing to ServiceNow and saying, here's information about the stuff within Flow that I've done, but also having ServiceNow maybe write to Flow and say, hey, here's the change request and here's all the stuff that we had from ServiceNow. Let me give you that data. Yeah?
How do you, when you have to identify the impact, right? Is it going to be a low complexity, medium, or high impact? How do you automate the identification of what the complexity is? Is that based on like the business service that's selected for that particular deployment?
Okay, so the question was, how do you automate whether it's high, medium, or low complexity? Can you automate that sort of a thing? So it's going to vary from company to company for sure. So definitely not every single company is going to be able to automate it the same way. But you can start doing business sorts of impact automation. So one of the things, like I said, test coverage. You should check and see if it's only 20% test coverage, that's automatically a high risk change. If it's 100% test coverage, maybe that's automatically a medium or low risk change. You might also look at dependencies automatically. If my item has 150 dependencies, I'm probably a pretty high risk change. If I have 1, 0, then I'm probably a low risk change. So it's stuff like that. It may be one of those things that you decide, you want to automate it as much as possible, but maybe you do want to, take a look through yourself and you're like, well, I really know that every time we've deployed this the last 12 months, which you can get automatically, it's failed, so this is a high risk change. So it's just those sorts of things you kind of want to look at. Oh.
What would be my approach to get compliance and change management group to go along with this and try this out?
So the question is, how would you get, compliance and change management groups to try this out? Because obviously they're going to see this and say, heck no, we don't want to do this. So one of the things is, if you can choose like a small group that you can prove it out with and say, this has worked for this smaller team, is one way that you can do it. The other way is to show them, look at all of the stuff that I can now give you in the change request that I wasn't giving you before because it took a person too long to type it in. Or look at all the invalid data. If you can start to do, I've seen time and time again where somebody says, there's no dependencies, but really there were quite a few dependencies and they just didn't know about them, or they didn't, I'd like to think they just didn't know about them. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Talking about automating the whole process, do you think that it's prerequisite to actually automate your deployments, or do you still have a manual ITIL have automated process go against the manual process?
So the question was, is it a predecessor? Do you have to automate your deployments to automate your process? I would say you should certainly, for sure, automate your deployments before automating your process. You could automate your process before, but then your bottleneck's going to go from your process to your deployment. So it's, where do you want your bottleneck? And ideally, you don't want a bottleneck. Any other questions?
Well, it's also that you don't automate your deployment, you don't have data.
Yeah, and that's the comment there was that if you don't automate your deployments, you don't have the automatic data. So how can you, the whole thing works because you've automated both sides. If you're automating the process, then you're going by what somebody said. And like I said, that's the thing I've seen time and time again in change requests is people say there's no dependencies. People say it's a low-risk change, but in reality, you find out when your production system is down that it really was a high-risk change. Yeah?
If I have a CI/CD pipeline integrating with like traditional infrastructure, do you guys work with Ansible at all? Or what kind of orchestration mechanism do you have? To basically run through a playbook, right?
Yeah.
And hit some tests, CI/CD, hit something on shared infrastructure. Do you guys work with Ansible at all, or any product like that? Or?
Yes, we do. I can talk to you a little bit, remind me, or give you my card, and we can talk a little bit after about kind of some of the specific things.
Okay.
All right. Another?
Can you talk about how you have seen effective management of dependency management?
Sorry, what was that again?
Effective management of dependencies.
Oh, how do you effectively manage your dependencies? So there's many ways that you can effectively manage your dependencies. I would say you definitely need to have your product within a system like Flow to manage your dependencies. Trying to manage your dependencies via spreadsheets, via I don't know what else people use out there, is just not maintainable. You have to definitely put your dependencies within a system. And you want to preferably have some ways of auto-discovering dependencies or trying to automatically figure out what your dependencies are. Any other questions? Do you want to talk a little bit afterwards? I see a, okay, let's. All right, thank you everyone.